It began on a night so still that even the sound of the ceiling fan seemed loud. The Realme 1 lay forgotten on the far corner of the desk, a relic from a time before faster, sleeker devices made it obsolete. Its cracked screen caught no light, its battery had been dead for months, and there was no SIM card inside it. I had meant to throw it away long ago. At 2:13 a.m., it lit up on its own. Not just the dim ghost glow that sometimes flickers when a dying phone briefly wakes. This was a full, bright screen. My name was not on it, no number was displayed, and yet it was ringing. I stared at it for a full second before picking it up. The moment I pressed the answer icon, sound flooded through. A strange, high-pitched static, undercut with something deeper, rhythmic, almost like breathing. Then the static shifted into bursts, sharp, uneven, structured in a way no interference should be. I didn't recognize the language, but it wasn't gibberish. It was something. The voice on the other end was urgent. It rose and fell in pitch as though the speaker were trying to fit complex information into short, clipped bursts. Behind it, a low thrumming sound like machinery far away. The signal wasn't clean. The distortion warped the syllables, stretching them in unnatural ways. My first instinct was to check the network. There was none. No Wi-Fi. No mobile data. Yet the connection held steady, as if the source was right there in the room with me. Then the screen shifted. A sequence of points appeared, white on black, connecting into unfamiliar patterns. I thought they were random at first until I noticed their symmetry. They looked like constellations, but not ones I knew from any hemisphere on Earth. There was something ancient about their arrangement, like they had been drawn from memory by someone who had traveled far. I felt the faintest twinge of vertigo, as though looking at them had shifted my sense of space. I started recording the call using my laptop's microphone. The audio wasn't clean. The alien voice was layered in tones my speakers struggled to handle. I uploaded the file into an offline AI decoding program I'd used once for a linguistics project. It churned through the waveform, hesitated, and then flagged the speech as structured, non-human language detected. The software had no translation model, but it recognized repetition and syntax. The first deciphered phrase was crude, assembled from probable phonemes. *, we have little time. *. I froze. That wasn't random interference. The AI also extracted background hums, isolating a consistent metallic rhythm, too precise to be natural, too irregular to be a mechanical fault. The constellations flickered again, this time with coordinates flashing beside them. I copied them into an astronomy tool, expecting nothing. Instead, it pulled up a star chart of a region deep beyond the edge of known human exploration, a place where no Earth probe had ever traveled. The strange part wasn't the location itself. It was that these coordinates couldn't be mapped from Earth's surface. They were the kind of view you'd only get from somewhere far out in interstellar space. My pulse quickened. If this was a prank, it was a sophisticated one. More fragments came through, patched together by the program. War. Closing in only you. The urgency in the alien's tone was unmistakable now. It wasn't a casual contact. This was a distress call. The words made no sense in context, but the emotional weight was undeniable. Whoever, or whatever, was speaking believed I could help. I thought of ignoring it, hanging up, pretending it had never happened. But something about the fact it had chosen this device, this dead, obsolete phone, hooked into me. Why not any modern line? Why not a global broadcast? The answer formed in my mind before I could stop it. Maybe it couldn't use modern lines. Maybe this old Realme one was somehow the only receiver it could reach. The voice grew more strained, breaking into harsher syllables. The signal dimmed like a fading heartbeat. I leaned closer, straining to catch every scrap of sound. A sudden burst of static made me flinch, and the constellations on the screen shifted one last time, arranging themselves into a path, or maybe a warning. I didn't know what I was agreeing to when I whispered into the dead microphone, "I hear you." But in that moment I knew one thing for certain. The call wasn't meant for anyone else. The signal wavered after my first reply, breaking into sharp bursts that seemed to test my responses. I kept my voice low, speaking simple words, waiting to see if it could mimic them. Minutes passed in a tense rhythm of sound and silence until a fragmented sentence emerged. Asterisk, hear, understand, trying. Asterisk, it wasn't fluent, but it was progress. The tone carried relief, and with each attempt, the alien voice became more distinct, as though some translation system was learning me in real time. I connected the Realme one to my old workbench setup, a patchwork of outdated processors, analog receivers, and a scavenged satellite dish. The phone became the core of an improvised decoder, bypassing every layer of encryption my modern systems would have forced on the signal. Within minutes, the voice sharpened enough for halting but recognizable English. Asterisk, I far trapped danger. Asterisk, the emotion behind the words was raw and immediate. The alien explained in short, clipped fragments. They were aboard a small scout vessel, caught in the gravitational drag of a collapsing star. The event had thrown out a wave of radiation that crippled all their standard communications. Quantum channels, laser relays, everything they used had been blinded by the stellar interference. The only reason this call was reaching me was because the Realme one operated on an ancient analog frequency their enemies didn't think to jam. What they described was staggering. A galaxy-spanning conflict spilling into this star system, and their ship, damaged, energy reserves dwindling, was stranded between hostile forces and a cosmic phenomenon that would consume them. I asked why contact a stranger on a distant planet. The answer came slowly, as if weighed for trust. Asterisk, old Earth map. Only humans keep. Asterisk, they had intercepted fragments of our early deep space transmissions, Voyager data, obsolete star charts, and found gaps that matched the gravitational distortions they now faced. Their own navigation systems had been built for current stellar positions, but the collapsing star had warped space in ways their algorithms couldn't reconcile. My planet's outdated records, built from centuries of ground-based observation, might hold patterns no one else in the galaxy had preserved. The realization sank in. Humanity's primitive, obsolete ways of looking at the sky, manual plotting, fixed-position star photography, were now a strategic advantage. It wasn't our advanced tech they needed. It was the stubborn human habit of keeping old, supposedly useless data. As the alien spoke, I picked out a second layer beneath their voice. Bursts of sharp, metallic tones, faster and harsher than the earlier ones. The translator tagged them as interference, but the alien's tone shifted when I mentioned it. Asterisk, enemies searching. Listen for me, not you yet. Asterisk, the implication was clear. Someone else was hunting this signal, and if they realized it connected to Earth, we might inherit the danger. I asked for their coordinates. The numbers appeared instantly, flickering on the phone's cracked display, shifting slightly as gravitational currents pushed the ship. They were dangerously close to the star's event horizon. If I could feed them the right trajectory corrections, they could slingshot out of the danger zone, but every second we spoke risked exposing them. Then came the first real choice. The alien's voice grew heavier, more deliberate. Asterisk, you help, risk to your world. You leave, we end. Asterisk, it wasn't a plea anymore. It was a statement of fact. I thought about the risk, of drawing the attention of whatever hostile fleet they were evading, of giving away Earth's position to forces far beyond us. But the alternative was letting them die when I had the means, however improbable, to help. I didn't give myself time to talk myself out of it. I'll help you, I said, and the line went utterly still for a long, suspended breath before the alien answered. Asterisk, then hurry. Time ends here. Asterisk. I began pulling together every resource I could reach without raising suspicion. My first stop was the dusty cabinet where I'd stored an archive of astronomical data from a project I had abandoned years ago. The hard drives were heavy, their labels worn, but the datasets inside were priceless. Decades of sky surveys, parallax measurements, and long baseline interferometry records compiled before humanity's space infrastructure had shifted to real-time quantum feed. Modern systems saw these as redundant clutter. To the alien trapped near the collapsing star, they were the missing pieces of a puzzle. The Realme one, though never designed for this kind of work, became the center of my improvised network. I stripped every non-essential function from it, turning the ancient hardware into a dedicated receiver and transmitter. Its processor was underpowered for large-scale computation, so I scavenged discarded workstation boards from storage, daisy-chaining them through old coax and Ethernet couplers. Each board added a fraction more processing power, slow by modern standards but steady, reliable, and most importantly, invisible to any system scanning for contemporary tech signatures. As the network spun up, I parsed the aliens' navigation data. The distortions around the star were unlike anything in our recorded history. Space itself appeared stretched, angles bent into curves that didn't exist in Newtonian geometry. My older datasets, drawn from epochs before such distortions, offered reference points the aliens' advanced algorithms couldn't generate. By overlaying their live sensor readings with our ancient sky maps, I could create a navigable corridor out of the gravitational mess. The alien's voice came through again, more stable now, though still wrapped in static. Enemy ships moving. Closer. Their sensors had detected two vessels altering course toward their position. It was impossible to know whether they had locked onto the signal, but the risk was growing with every packet of data I sent. I compressed my transmissions into bursts, using irregular intervals to make them look like natural cosmic noise rather than structured communication. Hours passed in concentrated silence, broken only by the Realme's faint electronic hum. Piece by piece, the escape trajectory took shape, a narrow slingshot vector that would use the star's intense gravity to accelerate the scout ship just enough to escape both the event horizon and the hostile patrols. It was a dangerous maneuver even by their standards, and the alien made no attempt to hide it. One chance. No repeat. As the calculations neared completion, I felt the edges of another presence on the signal. A different frequency brushed against ours, scanning in short, violent bursts. The alien confirmed my suspicion. They search. We'll find. My pulse quickened, but the work continued. I pushed the final set of coordinates through, layering them under harmless-looking noise patterns drawn from ancient pulsar recordings. It was a gamble. The enemy might ignore them, thinking they were natural emissions. Before sending the last packet, the alien paused. Their voice softened, the static almost dropping away. Your kind was small to us. Now, you are not small. The words lingered longer than the transmission itself. Then the Realme pulsed once, signaling that the data had gone through. That was when I noticed the enemy chatter spike sharply, and realized they weren't just moving toward the alien ship anymore. They were triangulating both of us. The enemy presence on the signal grew sharper, their probes cutting across the spectrum with a precision that left no doubt. They were closing in. The alien confirmed it in a clipped, urgent tone. Multiple ships. Both paths. You and I. Their escape route, the one we had pieced together from obsolete human data, would be useless if the enemy reached them before they could make the slingshot. And if they reached me, Earth's location would no longer be a secret. I scanned my setup, knowing I didn't have the technology to fight a fleet. But I had something they might not expect. Deception built from the same primitive ingenuity that had kept the Realme one invisible until now. I began pulling old transmission files from my archive, recordings from early space probes, atmospheric noise patterns, even fragments of abandoned deep space experiments. These weren't mere noise, they were fingerprints of real cosmic events long past, the kind of thing no one would think to forge. Working fast, I rewired the Realme's output to a relay dish and began shaping a false set of coordinates. They were built from my own sky maps but altered subtly to point toward a dead region of space, A pocket where a fleet could vanish into nothing, light years from anything useful. I embedded the data inside layers of ancient telemetry so convincing that any scan would read it as authentic. It wasn't just about sending them somewhere else. It was about making them believe they had found exactly what they were searching for. The alien's voice cut in again, strained but steady. Asterisk, they follow you now. Can you mislead? Asterisk, I didn't answer immediately, only pushed the first burst of my fabricated signal out into the void. The enemy chatter shifted almost instantly, spiking as they locked onto the bait. I could feel the hair on my arms stand as the frequency scans swept past me, hesitated, then surged toward the false coordinates. The alien announced they were moving, engines straining to full power. I watched the Realme screen as the last pieces of the escape trajectory pulsed green. The slingshot window was seconds away. If the enemy realized the deception too soon, they could still intercept. I sent one final noise burst, timed to overlap their probable jump sequence, masking the alien's true movement entirely. Then the line went silent except for the faint hum of the collapsing star's radiation. The coordinates I had sent into the void would hold the enemy's attention just long enough. When the alien's voice returned, it was different, lighter, almost reverent. Asterisk, you gave more than a path. You gave time. You gave us chance. Asterisk, there was no victory celebration, no promises of repayment, only the quiet acknowledgement that I had shifted the outcome of something much larger than I could see. Before breaking contact, they transmitted one last data packet, encrypted beyond my ability to open. For when you are ready, the message said. And then they were gone. I sat back in the quiet, the Realme one resting dark and inert in my hand, as though it had never come alive at all. Hours later, as the first light of morning crept into the room, the phone's screen lit once more. This time, two incoming signals pulsed side by side.